Hi, everyone. So on to chapter 6, which is about person-based structures, all part of our kind of internal alignment. And this kind of is kind of the last section in the internal alignment discussion. So, with person-based structures, we're really talking about skill-based pay and skill-based structures. With skill-based pay, the work involves teams, multi-skills and flexibility. People are deployed in a way that matches the flow of work. So we try to place people in positions to succeed based on the skills they have acquired. That's the whole idea. The more skills somebody acquires, theoretically, the more they should get paid. And if you kind of think about it, it makes sense. If you have a high school diploma, obviously you can make money. But if you have a bachelor's degree, but then you have a master's degree or a doctoral degree, you can theoretically earn even more with more skills that you earn. Kind of the same way more in like the trades area. So if you're an apprentice, to be a plumber, you have basic knowledge, but as you spend more time, learn how to do different things as a plumber, build the trade, build your skills, your pay should theoretically go up as the more skills you acquire. So these skill-based structures, they link pay to the depth or the breadth of the knowledge, skills, and abilities a person acquires that are relevant to the work. I mean, obviously, if you're a doctor, the ability to balance your taxes, doesn't really, flow. So, you wouldn't necessarily reward a doctor with more pay if he learns, a tax skill. But again, if a doctor learns how to, operate on a different part of the body, for example, that would be something that an additional skill that's relevant to the work being performed. So you would reward that. So that's kind of the whole idea behind this chapter. Is that the more skills we acquire, the more these pay structures that we create will reward those things. And this is good from an organizational standpoint because it supports the strategy and the objectives of the organization. Because obviously, any organization, the more skills their employees require, the more valuable they become to the organization. Which is why organizations invest such tons amount of time, money, and energy on helping their employees in training programs, in academic programs, and anything related to increasing their overall knowledge. It supports workflow. Obviously, when employees develop more skills, they can be branched out, if you will, and go in different directions on what skills they're able and what types of work they can be performed. And it's fair to employees. Employees, recognize, what, if I get my degree or if I learn how to do this, I'm going to be rewarded. So it's fair. You put in the work to learn this knowledge, and you're going to be rewarded with more pay or more responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a fairness to employees here, which also leads to employee motivation. So if you're getting rewarded because of the more that you're doing, you're naturally going to feel motivated to want to earn even more money, to earn more skill, or to get more skills, to earn more money, and to be able to apply it accordingly. So Exhibit 6.3 in your textbook shows kind of the internal skill-based structure, and kind of it gives a great example of what we're kind of talking about as we move through this chapter. So make sure to read Exhibit 6.3. So next, we need to if we're looking at these skill-based structures. Next, we need to define the competencies associated with it. Or another way of saying, we're trying to get at what underlies work behavior. What gets at the work behaviors themselves, and that's what we call competencies. And as your books discuss, there's 5 areas of competency. First are, of course, the skills that you acquire. Those demonstrate expertise. So if you learn how to fix a flat tire, or you learn how to take off the manifold, or when we're working on a car. So the more skills, that demonstrates expertise in that area. So that's one competency. The second one is, of course, more general knowledge. You accumulate information. The more you read, the more you study, the more you learn. Kind of makes sense. The third is what we call self-concepts. So, your own self-image, the values that you place on the work, the values that you place in your organization, and those structures add value to the organization through your own self-concept. The fourth are what we call traits, or really just the behaviors that you exhibit in the work itself. And then finally, the fifth group is what we call motives, or thoughts that drive behavior. What is your internal drive or push? For some, it's wanting to feed your family. For others, it's wanting to get as high as you can in the organization. Everybody's different. But what motivates you and drives your behavior? So And to give you kind of an example of the list of competencies, if you look at Exhibit 6.9, it lists like the top 20 competencies that are most often seen in organizations. And again, they're all really good ones. Looking at, in my career, what I have seen with competencies, my personal favorites are that you find from that list: initiative, flexibility, and teamwork. I found that those three things, not necessarily more than the others, but those three things: initiative, flexibility, and teamwork, I have found to be the most valuable, not just for me, but for my coworkers and friends and colleagues that I have worked with as well. So again, that's kind of an overall, just good view of what we're talking about with person-based structures. There's one additional thing as we kind of finish up, this idea of internal structure is there's a good section at the end of this chapter about bias, and bias sometimes can be blamed, for discrimination against women or minorities. Job evaluation in and of itself is susceptible to bias. You can, not necessarily the person conducting it, but just the idea of, okay, some of us may have, maybe what we call implicit bias, and you maybe not even realize that you're doing it, where, sometimes older workers tend to only think, in terms of how this affects older workers, or, men can have the tendency to maybe think, okay, this is only going to affect me as a man, and maybe not thinking how this could affect women or, people from different cultural backgrounds. So bias is something that we always have to be cognizant of as we move through these types of structures. And again, we will cover this a lot as we move forward throughout the semester. So, and finally, there's a section about wages criteria bias, essentially where current wages affect the results of job evaluation. Sometimes, if we're in a situation where wages are higher for some reason because of whether it's inflation related or whatever, maybe that affects how we do our valuation because again, it doesn't necessarily match the market. So wages sometimes can be biased, up or down based on what's going on in the market. So that can affect the actual true value of a job versus a temporary. If we're in a depression or a recession, for example, wages are going to be very different than if we're in a boom economy, for example. So sometimes wages can affect the true value or true job evaluation that we're looking for. So just kind of some overall general thoughts of Chapter 6. Again, we're coming to the end of our internal-based structures, and we're going to start moving to a kind of a different section with as we move forward throughout the chapters. But again, as always, if you have questions, don't hesitate to let me know. Thanks.